Welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I am Tim O'Malley, joined today by Pete Sampson of The Athletic, John Bryce of Football Scoop, and Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated. And Tim, we have a few things to get to in this segment, but I want to start with your interview with Jack Swarbrick. There's a very small picture item I want to talk to you about. I think our listeners will like, but let's go big picture first. The point of your interview, why Marcus Freeman was the right man for the job back then in Jack Swarbrick's mind. And I'll give you the three C's of curiosity, confidence, and then counting for later on.
Remind me of those after I get done talking here. Well, I mean, I think Marcus Freeman he turned it into an advantage by being the first guy that was interviewed because he interviewed so well. And again, Jack Swarbrick emphasized that I watched him all year. I watch all the coaches all year, all the time. He gave a great story about Clark Lee, when Clark Lee was still the linebackers coach and how he handled a mistake by a player. But it was essentially Marcus Freeman interviewing extremely well. And then when Notre Dame did speak to other candidates, they, Swarbrick compared Freeman to the other candidates, and in each instance, he felt like that Freeman came out on top. And then you mix in the player reaction and meeting with the players and Kurt Heinisch in particular telling him not to screw things up and hire Freeman. I mean, I think Freeman went into that interview with the players, maybe, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but maybe kind of hoping that that's how the players would see it. And then it was emphasized 10 times over. So yeah, Swarbrick talked about he came to his house. The interview was at Swarbrick's house. He put him in an uncomfortable seat to keep him uncomfortable, and then grilled him with questions. And it was the intellectual curiosity was the
Yeah.
phrase that Jack Swarbrick used, and Marcus Freeman has that. I mean, I think we know that as well as anybody now, considering some of the things that he brings up, some of the motivational catchphrases that he uses. It hits home because when players say Coach Freeman said, or Coach Freeman always emphasizes, I coach high school baseball. I didn't ever hear any of my players saying, "Well, yeah, Coach, you said that." No, he says things that resonates with the players, and that's huge. When it resonates with players, and the message is hitting home.
I thought the intellectual curiosity part, because it also pertained to Clark Lee, and that was brought up, was important because when you talk to Clark Lee, the linebackers coach, before he was I think we even discussed it on the podcast, Pete. We were like, I mean, that guy was a great linebackers coach, but now he has to go. What his word was breathing or sipping through or breathing through a straw with linebackers to all of a sudden coaching an entire defense. And that was the first thought we had. It seemed like Marcus was ready to coach a team more than Clark Lee was even to coach an entire defense when he was hired. And of course, Clark Lee could not have done a better job in those 3 years.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's weird because I don't see Freeman and Clark Lee as like very similar,
No,
but they do have some similarities. Clark Lee is much more of a professor, and I think Marcus Freeman is much more of like a football player. But yeah, I think that's and look, Brian Kelly had this as well. Either you're learning or you're getting stale. So that's that's a challenge for maybe more veteran head coaches, and it's a different challenge for younger head coaches because they I remember sitting down with Freeman and I was asked him like how do you get the answers to the questions you don't even know to ask. And he talked a little bit about the Oklahoma State game at halftime, and they score, but they score too quickly, and then they give up points, and like the end of the game gets away from it. He's like, it was a successful micro thing, but like a mess macro, and it's like you kind of learn from that. And I think that we've seen Marcus Freeman learn a lot over the last 3 years. Some by trial and error, some by having success right away, but it's definitely been both of those things.
And Pete, I mean, Clark Lee extremely well. And the story that Swarbrick told was when he was still the linebackers coach, and there was a bust, and there was a 60-yard quarterback sneak. And to quickly summarize, Clark Lee said I haven't earned the trust of that player yet, so I'm not going to blister him, for making a mistake. And Lee knew he was certain what the mistake was, but even then, he didn't feel like he had earned the trust of that player, which is a extremely mature thing to be able to,
That's unique too, right? In
it
that
re it
profession,
really, well,
yeah, is unique.
Clark Lee is extremely unique. Yeah. So, yeah, and that was just another example. The other, like Swarbrick came under criticism from people that want to criticize everything about him for, pushing Al Golden. I asked him, was there ever any other coach that you pushed to BK or Freeman? And he thought, and he said, no, I can't think so. So that just tells you, the impact that Al Golden made on him. And I guess after, the 2022 season, it looked like a bad choice for many, although Notre Dame was certainly good defensively. They were just bad in the red zone, but it looked like a brilliant move 3 years later.
You know, I want to get to the point we talked about it off the air where Jack saw how Freeman responded to tough coaching himself, and with Brian Kelly destroying him or lighting into him after the Florida State game. Um, it's interesting because Marcus Freeman can light into somebody as well as Brian Kelly ever could. It's just you haven't seen it quite as much on television.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that Jack like cared how he responded to that too. I mean, I guess you have to have tough enough skin for that.
Yeah. But, and he didn't he wasn't being, Swarbrick wasn't being critical of Brian Kelly. He just said he ripped into him like you would expect him to. And again, he's just observing Freeman, and Freeman handled it and moved on. JB, I don't want to dominate this segment, but some of the coaches along the way that have impressed you the most, that probably interviewed very well when they had an opportunity like Marcus Freeman did.
Yeah, I mean, look, Marcus Freeman's at the top of the list. I've done three coaches symposiums this spring, and one of them was a virtual one a couple of weeks ago, and one of the questions was asking me almost, and it was a panel of coaches, and it was almost exactly that same question, TP, and I told the coaches like Marcus Freeman is in some pretty rarefied air with the way that he handles things. And especially for a coach still as relatively young as he is, both in general young and young in the tenure of being a head coach. David Cutcliffe was always very elite. I know he was almost going to be Notre Dame's offensive coordinator. I guess very briefly was Notre Dame's offensive coordinator. Just an elite human being in that regard. There have been a number of other ones. Dave Clawson, when he was at Tennessee, you knew that he got scapegoated because Philip Fulmer couldn't stop meddling. And I always pointed out to people there's a reason that Dave Clawson got unjustly scapegoated at Tennessee and turned around and went to Bowling Green and quickly led Bowling Green to a MAC title and parlayed that into the Wake Forest job, and then had more sustained success at Wake Forest than anyone through the years. So those are some of the guys. Zach Azzani, to me, who's in the NFL right now, is another one I met at Tennessee. I thought he was very good. Matt Drinkall right now, who's the new head coach at Central Michigan. I've been impressed with him for several years. Lance Leipold is a guy that I interacted with that you felt, he won so much at D3 up in Wisconsin that you felt like that could translate. I'm very curious to see what Matt Entz now does, that he's got an FBS program out at Fresno. Those are a handful of the ones for me, but since one of you brought up the Oklahoma State game and the lessons learned there, and we're in this era of ubiquitous video, I sure would like to see if there's video somewhere of that elevator ride after Oklahoma State scored right before the half and completely changed the tenor of that game, because I know that's still to the chagrin of many. So.
Speaking of to the chagrin of many, pretty sure you got the chance to talk to Swarbrick about the 10 men on the field double time incident against Ohio State. And he did not agree with the sentiment. I guess probably that there was a million sentiments that came out after that, but one of them was this is what happens when you're learning on the job as a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, what Swarbrick explained, that the lesson learned was they made a call from the sideline that is very similar to another call And so the wires were mixed there, and they didn't get the right personnel on the field. I think you know, I mean, still, I think that there's a level of responsibility there to be had by the head coach and the coaching staff, of course. But he ended up he gets a call from Nick Sirianni. The Marcus Freeman does get a call from Nick Sirianni the next day, and said that everybody in the NFL is scrambling now to have um, to be prepared to commit a penalty when you don't have any timeouts and accept the half the distance to the goal line or whatever the situation may be. Um,
The half the
and
distance to the goal line is 12 inches, so of course you should jump off sides or do anything
yeah,
like that.
so
That is
6 inches.
honestly something I know it's easy to say after the fact, but
Yeah,
that should be
yeah,
known. It's different when it's a 11-yard penalty, not 11, being 11 yard, an 8-yard penalty.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a 12-inch penalty, so I think that's I found it intriguing because I always just thought, man, this guy messed up twice. Not Marcus, not the coach necessarily, the player, you know. But it's up to the coaches to make sure those calls aren't that close, which is why it changed after that. But it's also up to the player to be on the field and
yeah.
listen to
Right.
the call correctly. Like there was always plenty of blame to go around. It was never Marcus Freeman, Al Washington, Al Golden, Jordan Botello, or the guy next to Jordan Botello when he looked over and didn't see Jordan Botello. That is also part of it, I would think.
Yeah.
I wanted to go put a finer point on something we talked about in our segment 2 last week, or excuse me, on Monday. We had about, what was it, Tim, 9 questions related to is there a clause for Charles Jagas's contract with NIL, or are there clauses across the country for such things? And of course, I sent that over to JB, and JB, you found some good stuff on this.
Yeah,
And I am indignant, by the way, but go ahead.
yeah. So first of all, there was no clause telling Charles Jagasaw that he could not ride UTVs or ATVs or play basketball or anything like that. The college game consensus to all the people I spoke with this week, and specifically yesterday, I spoke to two different agents who have each consummated more than 50 individual NIL deals during this transfer portal rev share, onset of rev share, but during this transfer portal NIL pay for play era. Not a single one is aware of it. I talked with an agent of another major, one of the largest agencies in the country yesterday. He's not involved in that division, but he has access to those contracts. They don't have it in their contracts, not for the college players. Yes, it's much more common in the NFL. The consensus was they wouldn't be surprised to see those kind of clauses try to be sneaked into the upcoming rev share agreements. But the other consensus from both general managers and the multiple agents that I spoke to was like, get ready for a fight. Like if colleges start trying to put those clauses in there for college kids, there's going to be a major fight from any of their advisors. And so it's with there still being an incredibly blurred line between the amateurism and the college athlete versus the professional athlete. The professional athlete doesn't have a lot of say in getting those clauses removed. Plus, it's truly their vocation. We all know it's their vocation now, but the fact that they're still technically student athletes, those clauses, not a single guy that I talked to, not a single agent said it was in any deal that they had ever done. The other thing that I thought was perhaps most interesting was that the consensus of how much more sophisticated schools are trying to make their upcoming revenue share agreements. And Notre Dame, I don't think, has really had their players start signing those yet. You couldn't officially sign them until July 1st anyway. Obviously, Notre Dame's players had a break for the 4th of July holiday and before they begin the second session of summer conditioning this month. So, but the big thing is that was pointed out to me, if you're a player and you don't have somebody like a legal advisor, a representative, an attorney that your family knows, or an official agent who reps you, to be very careful with the upcoming revenue share arrangements because schools are trying to sneak in to a second and third year in some of these revenue share agreements. And I made the point and said, well, what if you're a core special team starter and you're in the rotation at linebacker? You probably want that 2 year
Mhm.
rev share guarantee. But if you're Jeremiah Love, and he'll go pro after this year anyway, but if you're Jeremiah Love, you would only want to sign a 1 year revenue share agreement so that you can then renegotiate your
If
value.
you're CJ Carr, if you're CJ Carr.
Right, right, exactly. If you're CJ Carr or one of the James Flanagan or whomever, Leonard Moore, because Leonard Moore's going to have 2 years. You only want to sign a 1 year rev share agreement, but many schools are trying to put stipulations in there and say, well, we're going to give you all this money now, but you have to sign 2 years with us. So that to me was the most fascinating thing, other than the fact that I can definitively tell you there was absolutely nothing in Charles Jagusah's NIL operation or agreement with Notre Dame, period, point blank. But big picture, I didn't talk to anybody who have seen those implemented yet at the collegiate level. And then the other thing being, yeah, revenue share agreements are going to be really, really interesting to see if guys get duped in. And multiple people specifically reference Florida State and kind of some of the things that they're doing that are causing backlash. But that's where that stood for me.
I I have to imagine they find a way to get some of those in there. Just I know it's different because you're signing a contract for money, but like when Brian Kelly came to Notre Dame, bookstore basketball stopped for Notre Dame basketball players. Now he wasn't financial, but nobody ever played again. It was you cannot play bookstore basketball anymore, and that was like the fabric of part of the campus life was those. I mean, we can all name all the old famous football players, including Lou Holtz, on some of their teams that played bookstore basketball. That was just Brian Kelly saying no because it's outside of football. I'm shocked that it's not that it wouldn't someday be part of it.
Yeah, I'm sure that speaks to further collective bargaining,
Yeah.
labor unions, all of those things that are not yet a part of the collegiate game. But again, like specifically when I talked to two different agents, each of whom has consummated more than 50 individuals. And one of these guys, I mean, one of his guys that he signed this year got a seven-figure deal to go to a Big Ten team. So, I mean, this team couldn't have more on the line invested in this guy. The other quick thing I would note, because, and I don't remember if it's a question on today's segment or not, but there was a lot of questions, maybe on the board, about the NIL deal for the new kid that just committed
Yeah,
to
we do have a
Texas
question. We
Tech.
do have a question on that. Yep.
Okay, is that we have a question,
Yeah.
second segment on it? All right,
Yep.
then I'll hold for that.
I wanted to wrap up this segment, Pete, because you also spoke with Swarbrick on this topic, but I thought it was an interesting idea. The making of a new rivalry. And of course, chose Notre Dame and Clemson. If you guys have not seen that, it is worth a look at the cover photo. If you're a Notre Dame fan, Tim Priester, if you have not seen Pete's story, just take a look at the cover story right now. All you got to look at is the picture, and you are going to start smiling while we're here on screen. But
I'm not going to
Pete,
do it. I'll wait.
it's worth it. But Pete, I thought that was a fun topic to look at.
Yeah, it was part of a series we were doing at the Athletic about like the nature of rivalries, and like it's so much has been sold down the river, and I think college athletics in terms of like that traditional collective memory creating rivalry stuff. So it was for Notre Dame and Clemson to try to create a new one was interesting. I thought that I guess I kind of assumed the opposite was true, but Swarbrick said that the conversations started about 4 years ago, which predated the USC series being on the chopping block. Because I think the timing of the Clemson announcement, we're like, well, that's the replacement for USC. And Swarbrick was like, no, this was supposed to be in addition to USC because we need to provide better material for NBC with two marquee home games per year instead of like these kind of softer schedules. So that was kind of interesting. And then, yeah, I kind of talked to Clemson's AD Graham Neff and Swarbrick and a couple players just about like when the series became like a thing. It was like Ian Book he was like, I don't remember this being a rivalry when I played it, and even though I played them 3 times.
Yeah, I was gonna say he should.
And now it's like he came back for the game in 2022, and it was just like, okay, this feels like a thing now. But college athletics, I think there's so much that this is a rivalry. We're going to start it and tell you it's a rivalry, and you need to treat it as such. Like this one kind of happened organically. And now that Notre Dame and Clemson are on this 12-year deal, it kind of feels like, okay, yeah, this is I'll buy this as a rivalry. You're not creating a trophy and then telling me it's important.
Like the civil
So
conflict,
the civil
Connecticut
conflict, for
on Connecticut,
example.
South Florida.
So yeah, it was just kind of interesting about like the nature of rivalries, but also, I mean, the economic impact for Notre Dame and NBC, for Clemson and the ACC with their new rev share. It's about good games, but it's also about guaranteeing eyeballs because there's real money involved in that.
Tim, I think it's interesting because like how it just became a rivalry. Part of it for Clemson is it went Clemson winning, Notre Dame winning, Clemson winning, Notre Dame winning, and then
Yeah.
surprisingly Clemson winning. When Miami became an organic rivalry in the 80s into 1990, it was not because they were going back and forth. It was because there was hatred from one side and then they briefly went back and forth.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a legit rivalry now. And in this story that I did with Swarbrick, he talked about, he talked about culture, and that was one of the two things that the replacement for Brian Kelly had to address, culture and recruiting. Uh, Swarbrick pointed to Dabble Sweeney and what he's created the culture at Clemson. And I mean, it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, an awful season for Clemson's 3 losses. He's created that. They're phenomenal. They should be really, really good this year again. He's been resistant to, transfers. He's loosened up a little bit on that. But I agree with Swarbrick. He's created great culture there. And so now you have two programs with really good cultures going against each other.
Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. We'll be back with segment 2, Burning Up the Boards.
Segment 2, burning up the boards. We start with a question from Monty Burns. Enjoyed the countdown article on Noah Bernett, mainly because the level of input he sought out to choose Notre Dame. Is this the norm with transfers, or better put, has it become the new norm now that the transfer portal is a major part of the business? John Bryce, you did today's counting down story on Noah Bernett, and
Yeah,
he did his homework before he picked Notre Dame, and I would imagine that's pretty commonplace now.
yeah, I think that's very commonplace. And look, especially in quarterbacks and kickers, I would contend, or quarterbacks and kickers and punters, however you want to phrase it, they have a lot of commonality because they compete in so many same events or go to so many same camps through the years. So I think it was very normal for Noah Burnett to reach out to Mitch Jeter, the same as the coaches had Mitch Jeter reach out to some of his predecessors at Notre Dame before he chose to leave South Carolina. What I found most telling, and I'd gotten that interview with Noah in spring whenever they talked to us, but it was off to the side, one-on-one. It was one of those scattershot days that I love on the IAC turf, and so I'd saved it for the countdown purposes. But I'd forgotten how good the interview was because he told me about his meeting with Michael Lombardi, the UNC GM, after Bill Belichick arrived, and those guys tried to get him to stay. And he said, I didn't give them much of an opening because at that point in time, I'd already visited Notre Dame and knew that's where I wanted to be. And I thought it was very telling that Burnett said from that visit and from talking with Biaggi and Jesse Schmidt and Mitch Jeter and those guys, he very quickly wanted to be a part of the Notre Dame culture. So that's what I took out of that. Yeah, the homework happens. These guys all talk, especially again, quarterbacks and specialists. They know each other very well by that point in time. Just like me doing a story with Pete Limbo on Mitch Jeter a year ago because Pete had recruited him all the way back when he was at Memphis and then coached him when he was at South Carolina. So these guys all know one another, but it stood out to me that Noah Burnett, that Bill Belichick and company, specifically his GM Michael Lombardi, tried to talk Burnett out of leaving North Carolina. And he said, "No, I've visited Notre Dame at this point. I want to be a part of that. I want to go to Notre Dame, and I specifically want to be a part of that culture."
I think it's interesting that the aspect of this, where if you crunch at all the transfer portal window for successful teams. Like Notre Dame and Ohio State obviously had a bit of a difference in terms of legally speaking with someone. That we always say there is no Markinson, but when you crunch that window, it gets tough to do your homework as well as some guys need to. Really, I mean, that's why back channels, I guess, are probably pretty important for that.
Well, and it's become a necessity. I mean, instead of like, college kid interviewing for jobs after he graduates,
Yeah,
I mean, you still have
it's after a
time
semester in between
yeah,
graduating. Yeah,
right. You still have time in the college game, and it's a financial game now, and so you have to do that. So, kids got to be a little bit more mature um, earlier today, I guess, as a football player than you used to be, and the parents have to be vigilant as well and making sure that their son chooses the right thing as it pertains to football.
And this will have a little bit different dynamic, even more moving forward with the changes to the roster and the fact that Notre Dame's going to fund 95 scholarships in football. But again, you can have equivalency scholarships through those 10, so you'll be able to spread that out some. A lot of places have really relied heavily on walk-on tryouts for specialists, and then if they're good enough after a year, they can earn a scholarship. And so I will be fascinated to see how that dynamic specifically applies to specialists at the collegiate game. But obviously, Notre Dame believes it's also set for this year with Bernett and also set for its future.
Next question from CMU Pens fan. If you were granted an hour interview with Chris Ash next week, what sort of questions would you want to ask him to gauge how the 2025 season will go? Pete, you think this would be better on or off the record questions for Chris Ash?
Probably a lot better off the record because Chris Ash on the record is like kind of a quintessential football coach with like a little bit of paranoia involved in it. He doesn't want to share a lot. So I don't know if I would need an hour on the record for him to not answer the questions. But I mean, I'd be interested to see, what he really thinks of the defensive line, strengths and weaknesses of it. Strengths, obviously the edge rusher. Is it a weakness or just sufficient inside? How does he feel about that? And then, like, I don't know if he could answer this on or off the record. Like, how good are Adon Schuler and Drake Bowen at being Jack Kaiser and Xavier Watts in terms of problem solving? I think that's probably something that's going to take some time into the fall to really answer. But I'd be curious about that too.
JB?
On the record, it would be what type of tweaks do you feel after a full spring with these guys would benefit your defense? And off the record would be what do you feel you absolutely need to change because it's not going to work that transfers over?
Yeah.
I think for me, I certainly wouldn't need an hour, that's for sure. I would want to ask a little bit more about the zone implementation and just kind of how, now that he's had time to go back and watch every spring camp, where he feels like they're at with the ability to deploy zone. Does he feel comfortable that they're almost at a verge where they can drop it into a game at any point in time and feel like it's going to be an asset? And then the only other one, and this would probably be on or off the record, I would want to know, was it cumulative or a singular moment where he started telling people, yeah, KVA is not going to really come off the field this fall?
Yeah, Pete, I think your questions would be outstanding, and I have the same question about the legitimacy of the interior defensive line in particular. Marcus Freeman can say we got 6 guys there, but I mean, do you? We need to see it, and we didn't have an opportunity to see enough of that in the spring. But JB, that is exactly where I would go in terms of zone coverage. I give Chris Ash a lot of credit for saying the absolute right things when he was introduced
Oh,
to Notre Dame, right? I mean, it's like we're not going to
for the
reinvent.
Broyles Award winner that was in the national championship game.
Yeah, exactly. And so whether he was encouraged to do that or he had the intuitiveness to know that that's the direction he should go, kudos on both sides. If it was Notre Dame and him coming to that conclusion, but I mean, L. Golden didn't want to use zone coverages. If he didn't have to, he wouldn't use them. But I think it's overblown a little bit because the percentages are not
Yeah, they're
95 to
not like that, but
5%. It's
he just
not that
favors it so much. Yeah.
right. It's not that skewed, but that's exactly where I would go, JB, because I want to, I'm very interested to see just what kind of tweaks they do on the back end of the defense against the pass.
On the record this year, it's a good question to ask him is, did he end up talking to Golden? Because the one thing I think you could get from Al Golden's first year, it was when Golden in his second year said, I put in everything we had. I didn't need to put in everything we had. We were playing 12 teams. Why would I put in everything we have? Did you scout your 12 offenses to put in what you need on defense that first year? I thought that was
See,
such a good point because I never thought about that until he
he's
told
an
me that.
inexperienced defensive coordinator. That's why you don't choose him.
He got better.
Yeah, better.
He did get better. You can still choose him, but he did get better. Clear screen 25. And Priest, you're not here yet on first rate, but I think we do know the coaches. So, which opposing coaches on the 2025 schedules do you have the most and least confidence in as far as being prepared to beat Notre Dame?
I tell you, as I started going through the names, and of course I've been aware of them doing that the
head
first rate
coaches
stuff, but I'm a lot more impressed than I am unimpressed. The first guy that will come to mind for me is Elko. I'm not sure everybody agrees with that, but I thought number one, what he did when he came into Notre Dame for 1 year. Number two, what he did when he went to Duke for a handful of years. He would be the first to come to mind, but I mean, Spencer Danielson's done a great job at Boise State. Dave Doran has won at least 8 games, 6 of the last 7 years. No, he's not contending for national titles, but winning 8, 9 games, 6 out of 7 years at NC State is a good coach that has his team prepared to win most of the time. Fran Brown did a great job at Syracuse in his first year. It's going to be a lot more difficult for him this year, both in terms of schedule and the talent that he lost. But I mean, you're still going against Lincoln Riley. I know a lot of people don't like him and criticize him, but he's still Lincoln Riley. Bill O'Brien has a ton of success in the coaching realm on various levels. He's at Boston College. Pat Narduzzi always puts, I'm taking everybody's name from you guys, but
they're all the coaches have a chance to beat Notre Dame at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Narduzzi's a really good defensive coach. Frank Reich has NFL experience. Barry Odom coached at Missouri. Sam Pittman, I mean, I don't necessarily. I was surprised when Arkansas chose him. He's an offensive line coach, and he looked like an offensive line coach to me, and didn't think that he would be chosen. Brian Newberry, I don't know, but he brought in an excellent offensive coordinator to change things up. So I think it's an impressive group of coaches, just in general. Again, not all these guys are national championship winning coaches, but Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, and Thomas Hammock went into last year on the verge of getting fired. So,
yeah,
but you named all of them, right?
I think I probably did.
Cristobal, Miami
I
can't
probably
win.
did, but
You didn't name Cristobal. Miami
yeah,
can't win
Cristobal was the
game.
only one I was like, I'm pretty sure he got 11 out of the 12.
Oh, speaking of Cristobal, I think he's had a penchant for some huge wins. I think that him taking Oregon into the shoe and winning a few years ago at Ohio State was a big time signature win. I think they always also tend to lose a game that they shouldn't lose, which is why they were not in the playoffs last year, even with the number one pick
true.
in the NFL draft. But I would also point out with that staff. Yes, we're talking about change for Notre Dame at the defensive coordinator position. Miami has 4 new coaches just on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's incredibly important here. I'm Bill O'Brien to me would be like from a tactical standpoint.
Yeah, I think
I
that's what you're
think
looking
that's
for,
the
is
most
tactical
daunting
consistency.
coach on Notre Dame's slate this year, just from a tactical standpoint. I think Pat Narduzzi is backsliding, and I think Pitt will have another disastrous season. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's a program that is struggling, and it pains me to say that. And if my friends on that staff hear this, I guarantee I'll get cussed out. But like I think they're in some real trouble there, and I also think that they're in some trouble big picture with college football because they have not figured out NIL and they have not recruited well. They develop great. They develop
Yeah,
great,
good.
especially on the defensive side of the ball, and they've done a nice job with their running backs through the years as well. But I think Pitt to me is in the ACC, very similar to Mississippi State in the SEC. Like what is their identity and where do they go?
I really like Pitt's defensive front seven. I think it's really good. They've got some questions on the back end. I think Holstein will be better than he was last year, and it's at Pitt. I mean, I just don't, again, I was taught by Lou Holtz to think about what can go wrong,
They
not
did
what's
beat
going to
Pitt
go right.
45-3 last time they were there, but that quarterback probably won't come back. There was.
Yeah, that was an emergency starter, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Pete, you have a coach?
I mean, I think Elko is the best coach on the schedule. But Cristobal and O'Brien, Cristobal because of the talent assembled, like
Right.
it's just not even. Do I think Cristobal is a great coach? I do not. But I think he's good, and he's got a really good, talented roster, and they're playing at Miami. And O'Brien, like, if it was just a X's and O's, like I would Boston College Notre Dame would be kind of a toss up, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's Jimmy's and Joe's.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what Boston College has going against it this year? Their
Boston
play
College.
their players aren't their
Yeah.
players aren't very good.
Yeah.
Oh, and they wear New Balance uniforms. I don't know.
Right.
I think
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
it's like Frank
Elko,
Reich is a really good coach. He has no players. Like
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Priester's
Yeah.
point about Elko and Pete echoing it. Remember, the text you sent me, Tim, is that Mike Elko is taking over defensive play calling duties. So Mike Elko is number one on this list by far. However, I want to ask you guys this. So Tim's first rate series, these are the number one coaches since we were merged together in 2015 season.
Oh, okay.
Mike Norvell coming off of the undefeated regular season. Dabo Sweeney, Brian Kelly, Dabo Sweeney, Brian Kelly, Shaw when he was one of the top coaches,
Yeah.
D'Antonio and Dabo Sweeney. Other than Shaw, it's hard to use Shaw because we don't think of him the same way now.
No.
But those coaches are better than the top of the list here because one of the years with Kelly was when UGA was second on the list with Kirby Smart. Obviously, he hadn't won it yet. That's a pretty damn good coach to be going against. Ryan Day. One year, there's Clemson. Okay, Marcus Freeman's first year when he was a first-year head coach. I'd like to point this out again. Dabo Sweeney, Ryan Day, and Lincoln Riley were on the list. At the top of that list. Lincoln Riley going over to USC. So these are good coaches, but man, there were some really good coaches on previous lists, though.
Right,
too.
like college football head coaching track record, Riley had it at Oklahoma, but the other guys don't have, Doran's been consistent, but again, that's relative to NC State. Yeah, I think that's a good point. There aren't long timers here that have had great success over extended period of time.
From Volley Cheer on High, can someone explain how NIL deals will work under the new settlement? Texas Tech is reportedly paying five-star Felix Ojo $5.1 million over 3 years. With schools only getting $20.5 million a year, are schools really paying a kid straight from high school $1.7 million a year? Or is this something where a school is promising to find sponsorship deals for them that are worth a certain amount?
Yeah, and as it pertains to Texas Tech specifically, it's also worth noting their Matador club has broken the market for the Kennedy girl that is their pitcher that they got from Stanford. She was the first ever $1 million pitcher in college softball, and they've since reworked that deal after last month's Women's College World Series, and she's gotten another new deal. I've done some homework on this five-star OT's new deal with Texas Tech, and the consensus I've got is that it's not worth 5.1 million guaranteed. That his agent is trying to calculate every single possible incentive and other things into there. That the deal is far more, which is still a lot of money, but the deal is far more likely worth around seven to 800,000 a year. So really, what
That's
I've been
huge
told,
difference though.
Yeah.
Than 1.7
Some
million a year.
change.
Yeah.
Some change.
Yeah, but what I've been told pretty adamantly is that deal is worth over 2 million guaranteed, but not anywhere near the 5 million guaranteed. Much like there was much made about Nico Iamaleava's deal when he got to UT because it could be worth up to 8 million. Well, obviously he's not getting 8 million because he's gone, but also I had current coaches on that staff tell me that the kid left $400,000 to $600,000 on the table because of the autograph signings and other things that he blew off that were
That's
part of his deal. So
crazy.
imagine being 20 years old and leaving $500,000 on the table. But anyway, but now moving forward with the new deal, and Pete knows this well because we've talked about it. You've got that third party. So anything over $600 has to go through Deloitte. Now, this is the one every general manager I've talked to this month, a bunch of them, they expect major lawsuits to come out of this. So I think this is the next lawsuit frontier, probably this in the transfer portal window, because it sounds like coaches believe we're going to go to one transfer portal window, and so the next piece of litigation is expected to be the players or schools that fight the Deloitte ruling when a player is trying to get $50,000 to go to an ice cream shop for an hour and they can't justify that. And then player movement being restricted is the other front where there's a lawsuit expected. So hopefully that answers it. That's how NIL deals are supposed to work now. I've talked about it previously on these pods. I'll reference it again. That's why whatever the group they're calling it, the alignment or whatever it is, the Power Four conferences plus the rebooted Power Five, they're trying to basically unofficially agree that they'll adhere to the 20.5 million rev share, which again, most big time football powerhouses are getting 16 to 18 million, and then trying to supplement that with real NIL deals.
Yeah, we had like at the athletic group sourced it out that it was a 3-year, $2.3 million deal for Felix Ojo. So yeah, that's kind of $800,000, and then there was an agreement to renegotiate if things go well. Also, an agreement to like, hey, if this Deloitte and these rules blow up in everyone's face, like if we go back to the Wild West, we'll go back to the Wild West. Which I wouldn't say that's unlikely at this point. So yeah, I think that these NIL deals they are what they are. They're pay for play. I think that Notre Dame is in this sandbox as well, because you have to be if you want to compete at the highest level, and that's. But yeah, it's a difficult. I don't know how this is going to resolve, and like Bryce's point is right. There's going to be a ton of lawsuits on this because it's still not a open free market for how much more open and free it was than anything was happening in college football 10 years ago.
$15,000 for a Dairy Queen visit would have been handy yesterday, because when I was at Dairy Queen, guys, yesterday they ran out of ice cream after we had paid. So that was not
Wow.
awesome. But yeah,
Because they paid too much in NIL to some Notre Dame football player.
And Chipotle had no plasticware.
And Chipotle
Boy,
had no utensils. But
you've
it was
been
a day.
screwed, T.O.
My daughter, after a very long day of volleyball, had no utensils for Chipotle and no ice cream treat for Dairy Queen. But that was tough. Our first question here our first combo question, I'm sorry, regarding NIL. Lid FDJZ asks, and he is a Notre Dame fan talking to a Penn State fan, so this is important. I had a discussion with a Penn State fan, and we were discussing incoming freshmen going to Texas Tech. He said ND pays their incoming recruits very well, and in fact, they're in the top 3 of college football in that regard. I did not believe it, but I am not sure. Can you provide your thoughts? I am sure he is just jealous of Notre Dame's recent recruiting. Top 3 freshman recruiting would seem high to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't go top 3.
I wouldn't go top 3 either.
But man, I do think they've come a long way from where they were 2 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. They're very competitive. They have a great structure they believe they have a great structure. It looks like certainly the way they're recruiting, they have a great structure. They have a great plan. Again, I've said it repeatedly on this pod and other places. I'll say it again. They have a tiered payment structure system. One other thing to note that ties into that last question and this question that I meant to bring up and just failed, suck today, is that a lot of these kids are getting NIL money depending on where they're at right now in high school that's being directed from the college. And so that can increase the value of a deal because you can be told, okay, you're committed to us. You're in a state that allows NIL. You're going to go ahead and get $250,000 your senior year of high school, and you need to consider that as part of your payment once you get to our school. So you're getting $250 now, but really you need to think of that as $65,000 a year extra for your 4 years at school XYZ. But then another component is that a lot of schools, therefore, also are putting into these NIL deals. Okay, you're getting this paid now. You committed to us at June going into your senior year. You're getting paid for the next 6 months. If signing day comes in December and you flip on us, read the language. There's buyout clause in there. That's the other big point that I would make. But yes, schools are also somewhat skirting NIL rules by getting the payments started to the kids in high school. And I'm with Pete. I don't think Notre Dame is top three, but Notre Dame has come miles and miles. And I said it on Monday's podcast. I'll say it again. Marcus Freeman continues to rave about the job that Mike Martin has done and the NFL perspective that he brings to help Notre Dame have a tiered salary structure.
I found this follow-up, Priester, interesting. I'll go with you from BOC. Is Notre Dame the biggest winner in the NIL era so far? I can't think of another program that has leveled up so quickly now that compensating players is above the table.
Well, it's a good point. I don't. Is this question asked if I don't know Mitch Jeter misses the field goal against Penn State and they lose? I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it certainly is NIL. I think a lot of it is just Marcus Freeman, the culture he's created, the influx of talent, the great job of bringing in, transfers to spot fill. I think it's
those guys weren't free though. The influx of talent and the transfers, the NIL era allowed them to come.
There's no doubt about it. But they weren't necessarily five-star transfer, projected five-star transfer guys either. It was more
QBs, yeah.
Fit, yeah. Well, yeah. Fit and still Notre Dame foot, still Notre Dame, a nod to Notre Dame culture in choosing those guys. But I don't think you can just say NIL. I think there's a lot of contributing factors, most especially the culture that Marcus Freeman has created.
I would say a major contributing factor is how well Notre Dame has recruited for Notre Dame, and it has evaluated incredibly well in the high school ranks and then done a great job of developing those players once they get there, i.e., an Emil Wagner or a Jaden Osbury or Leonard Moore or Ben Morrison. Like Notre Dame identified those players as elite and then helped develop them into elite players.
How about the development of Javante Jean-Baptiste at Notre Dame? I mean, he hadn't accomplished anything of real note at Ohio State. Shout out to Al Washington for developing him into a. He was great his 1 year at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
From Caden McFarland, of recent national champions or legitimate contenders, which one might ND's 25 offense come close to approximating? I'm worried that a non-running QB plus good but not great receiving core leaves them without a real comp and perhaps in no man's land when talking about actually winning the title. It's a good question because the wide receivers actually won the title last year. It actually did come down to that one position where
it did.
They have plenty of great players on both sides, but one had those guys.
I'm going to let you guys go first on this one, please.
Yeah, I feel like it's tough to. I'm just going through recent title winners and like which ones didn't have a killer or two outside the numbers on offense. Most of them did, like in multiples, and Notre Dame doesn't really have that. So, I mean, Michigan,
Yeah.
that wasn't an elite wide receiver group by any stretch, but
Bowers on Georgia made it pretty elite is the thing.
Yeah, and that's like those defenses had like 3 or 4 first round picks, and like Notre Dame is not there in terms of that level. Certainly the Clemson teams, LSU goes with doesn't need to be recounted
talk about
here
how
on
many
this
touchdowns they
podcast,
got.
JJ Post, but it's a concern that like the offense can't, like, I think the offense will be very good, but I also think their ceiling might be very good. And I like is very good enough when you get into facing Ohio State in January or some another, like, can you beat Georgia that way again? That's tough. It's tough to win that way all over and over and over again.
Yeah, I like the Michigan
Me
comp
too.
a lot,
Yeah.
Pete. I would contend maybe the second Georgia title team because I mean Jake Fromm was not elite. He was just a very good college quarterback, and Bowers,
Stetson
Bowers,
Bennett.
yeah, Stetson
Yeah,
Bennett,
yeah.
yeah. Bowers was really, really good, and Lad McConkey.
Yeah.
But I would contend Georgia didn't have a Jeremiah Love, and I don't, and they were good at running back, but I don't think their second running back was maybe necessarily as good as Jadarian Price can be. Defensively, yeah, those Georgia teams. I mean, well, just look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Like they're basically Georgia's defense now in
Yeah.
the NFL, and they just won the Super Bowl. I do think Notre Dame has future first round draft picks on defense, just not for the 26 NFL draft.
Good point, Tim. Stetson Bennett, but man, when Stetson Bennett was
Yeah. He
playing
could run. He could
his
run.
best, he was great. He was great. Pete, to your point about the wide receivers, I agree. I mean, they don't have a Jeremiah Smith, but I mean, Notre Dame's got to feel pretty good about Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse. And
Do they have an Igbuka, Tim?
no, they do not. They do not have that. And I think we're all big Emeka Ibuka
Yes.
fans.
He had a career.
Just the career he had and his development but I mean in Fields and Greathouse, man, you better be able to defend bigger, stronger receivers because those two guys should be really good. But point taken, and of course Michigan is the absolute best comparison, I think.
I took a quick look when Michigan won it. Um, Looking at quarterback rating is probably not the most important thing here. They were 82nd, but I'm sorry, not rating in passing yards. They were 82nd, but 24 touchdowns and 5 picks. That'll help Notre Dame's offense. That is what Michigan had that season. Um,
You think
you're
Carr
complete,
if Carr's the starter, you think he can be limited
but
to?
he completed. There was McCarthy 72% completion. Obviously, not his first year starting like C.J. Carr. So that's pretty good. But I do think Notre Dame's running game, obviously, as JB pointed out, Jeremiah Love's a little different than Jeremiah Love and this offensive line and Jadarian Price. Because I mean, you could rest Love a little bit. Michigan's running game, while very good, was not quite at the Jeremiah Love level.
Right. We have a question from Air Pirate 73. Whether Notre Dame ends up third or eighth in 2026 recruiting, I say that this class, the 2026 class, is just about as good as Notre Dame can possibly get considering team needs. The Stargazers are setting up scenarios where top five or bust is the only thing that counts. What are your opinions regarding this class so far and its value for the future of the Notre Dame football team? And let's go ahead and, just for the sake of argument, add Nick Reddish and Elijah Golden to the mix. They'll be announcing within the next 10 days or so. Nick Reddish tomorrow, Friday, July 11th. Pretty damn good class.
I think it hits needs. It flexes out on the new roster limits a little bit with what they did at receiver, offensive line, probably defensive back, maybe defensive line too. So I think it does a good job with all of that stuff. It's a really good class. It's deep. Does it have Alabama level at the top? Probably not. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to do that. But I think they found guys that were interested in Notre Dame, like that would be interested in Notre Dame every year. There's a ton of those guys, but they also found guys that looked at Notre Dame and made a football decision about Notre Dame. And they don't always do that. And so that to me is a significant upgrade for the class, is like getting guys who are coming here to, I hesitate to say play football, but they looked at Notre Dame as like, this is a football decision and I get the academics, opposed to I get the academics and then I get football.
Sorry about that, Pete. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You took an exceptionally long pregnant pause there, so
Yeah.
I'll apologize while also blaming your ass. I would say when you look at it, Notre Dame right now, according to the 247 composite, which is the best, Notre Dame has four top 40-ish players, two of them 5 stars. I don't have the stat right in front of me, but when you go back and look at all the past national champions, for X number of years or whatever, they've had multiple 5 stars as part of their recruiting classes and part of their rosters. And so to the point about what this class does, yes, it hits a lot of needs, but it also checks that you're winning battles for the tip top talent in high school football. And again, that's what ESPN's done stories on it. CBS 247 have done stories on it. Like your national champions have 5 stars sprinkled across their roster. So I think that's incredibly significant because, again, Notre Dame has 2 5 stars technically committed right now with 2 more guys that will enter into their final years with a chance to climb into those 5 star rating.
I like to look at it so we can find something outside the stars for Air Pirate. So we did this podcast a couple years ago, and it's the Adon Schuler class. That was the one I had for the most guys I thought would hit on signing day. Is that just like he'll be a good player at Notre Dame? And it was way more than usual. It was 17, which is far from the norm. Like Kyle Hamilton's class, I think, was 9. That was a smaller class, and I was wrong. Like I didn't have J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leafau in it, but on signing day, I had 17 for Schuler's class. The current class, so Ferremo's class, was 13. I wonder where this one will land. It won't land at 17, but if you get to that 13 range, that's a nice. It doesn't mean you're right. I mean, I'm not saying these guys all hit or not because, as I said, but 17 is a lot of guys if you're an analyst looking at film thinking they're going to hit.
Yeah. Well, I don't care if Notre Dame finishes 7th or 5th or 8th or 5th. What are we talking about? A difference of a player or two?
It's the difference of like 1 5-star player.
Okay. Well,
that is one 5-star player is important because you need more than one.
No, it is. And if he hits, he's a really, really good football player.
Yeah.
I get that. But, Pete, your comment, you've said this before, and I totally agree with it. Guys making football decisions and choosing Notre Dame, that, like maybe for a tight end or an offensive lineman, that was common. But Caden Finley, that's just not a decision. And, I have him rated higher than most people. I think he's definitely a top 100 player. But he's a wide receiver making a football decision like that on Notre Dame, and that's just rare. That's rare, and so it's certainly headed in the right direction. We have a double question here to wrap things up. VA Doc 88 asks, Marcus Freeman is 33-10 overall, and 4 of these losses have come before October. What changes have you seen that would lead you to believe the Irish can enter October unbeaten for the first time under Freeman? Is 2025 the most difficult schedule before October so far for Freeman? And then with HC92, I know we're supposed to believe it could never happen under Marcus Freeman, but what game on this year's schedule gives you the worst Marshall/Stanford/Northern Illinois vibe?
I don't think they're going to go undefeated in September.
They just don't play. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think the schedule is what it is, and I think this Notre Dame team will probably be a lot better in November than they were in September. I think you always expect that to be the case. I just think with a first-time starting quarterback, it's really going to be the case this year. So this would probably be more of a one-loss September at least. So I don't think there's like what changes would you have seen to lead you to believe they can enter October undefeated? Like I don't think those changes exist. Like you bring back Riley Leonard for a 5th year or 6th year, like that's. You would need something different at quarterback, I think, for that to be the case.
I don't think Gabe gives me those vibes. It's weird because I just don't think they're going to lose to Purdue, but where Purdue is slated on the schedule is all right. So let's say.
Yeah, they're not good. They're
not
good.
Neither was Northern Illinois, neither was Stanford, though. Marshall's pretty good.
No,
those other teams stunk. So let's not pretend like they were good.
I consider Northern Illinois much more highly than I do Purdue this year, and I felt that way. Right. I understand.
The point spread's going to be way different than 28.5 for Purdue. It's not going to be 28 and a half. So
Yeah.
Notre Dame, Purdue, I can't see them losing to Purdue, but that's the point. The Purdue game follows Notre Dame could be at its ultimate high, right? Ohio State and Texas A&M. They could be at their ultimate high point, 2-0, ranked second in the country, because everybody sees them beat those two teams in the first two games. Purdue comes in. This is what happened when Marcus Freeman lost his other games. His team was at an all-time, or at what seemed like a peak high. Texas A&M, peak high. Finally rebounded from that 0-2 start. Stanford comes in. I mean, like, this is the type of game that you can't lose. They should not lose to Purdue. They shouldn't lose to NC State. Let's say they go 5-0 in September. Would they 4-0? But it'd be 5-0 going into NC State. That's the one you shouldn't lose. It's NC State or Purdue is the weird one. I mean, NC State comes after hard games and before USC. Purdue comes after very hard games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my answer kind of by default would be Arkansas, even though it's not a home game. You know, it's a noon game. Arkansas is a program that was not very good. Arkansas has a coach who I like and have known a while that is undeniably on a massive hot seat, and he's got, you know, his version of Brutus calling the offense and Bobby Petrino. So you've got a lot of subplots there. I will say this to Pete's point: like, if Notre Dame gets through that Arkansas game and is sitting there 4-0 after its first four games, then I think Notre Dame has an undefeated regular season. If Notre Dame turns the calendar to October and hasn't lost a game yet, I think Notre Dame will go undefeated at that point.
Like when I look at opponents in 2025 that are relatable to the Marshall, Stanford, Northern Illinois, I mean, that the only two real bad teams are Purdue and Stanford.
And Stanford's not an option for this stinker. If you're a playoff contending team, you're going out there and you're pounding.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, yeah, you know, that becomes a big game, and Marcus Freeman's ready for big games, generally
like
speaking.
If Stanford came in here week 5, they would be a great contender for this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like coming after Boise State.
You know, I mean, look, we look at Marshall and Northern Illinois because their names are Marshall and Northern Illinois. They weren't awful teams. Stanford, the year that Notre Dame lost to them, that was an awful team. Purdue's not good. Stanford's not good. They don't have enough talent to beat Notre Dame. Northern Illinois, I guess you could say, well, they didn't have it either, but you know, their quarterback played at a level that I don't think he didn't play to that level again the rest of the year.
I think he got benched.
There you go. So yeah, you never know who's going to rise up, but I don't know. It's tough for me to say that. I guess maybe at BC when it comes with, you know, the veteran head coach, the former NFL coach. Maybe that could fall into that category, but again, that's on the road. That's not a home game like Marshall, Stanford, Northern Illinois. I don't know. I don't spend a whole lot of time giving this serious consideration now because
you don't know until after the fact when a team beats Notre Dame like Northern Illinois.
That's generally the truth, but I also think that Notre Dame football today is a lot different than Notre Dame football was, whatever the date was when they lost to Northern Illinois.
I do think that he asked if this is the most difficult schedule before October. 2023, you had Ohio State coming in. You're an underdog. Notre Dame's not going to be an
2022, you had to go to Ohio State.
2022, you had to go to.
That was
Ohio
even worse.
State. Even worse. And you also had Duke that had just beaten Clemson after Ohio State. And then you went to Louisville. Yeah, you had 6 games before October in 2023. That was the problem there too. Yeah.
And T.O., we're on the field before the at Ohio State game, desperately trying to see if Jarrett Patterson's going to be ready to play.
That didn't help.
And he wasn't.
No,
he wasn't.
I don't think that would have broke the bank on that one because they had a quarterback on the other side of the field that was actually pretty good under pressure too.
Yeah,
so
that he was.
Hit a little
that
bit
he was.
There. That was a fun edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. We'll be back on July 14th. We'll 2 more coming up next week, and we'll try to wean in some more football questions. But I think when camp starts is when it gets pretty nitty gritty, away from opponents, NIL, and where Marcus Freeman could improve or fall again to a bad team. Until then, for Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of Football Scoop, Pete Sampson of The Athletic, I'm Tim O'Malley, and you have listened to Irish Illustrated Insider. Thanks for watching.